What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Spurs post-game reaction show with Shivam Patel. I'm a basketball analyst live here in San Antonio, Texas, a huge Spurs fan. And I'm back, and the Spurs, had a tough loss tonight to the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets were winning most of the game, but the Spurs made a furious comeback at the end and really had a chance to, win the game at the end, but the game went to overtime. But before I start getting into the game, I just want to remind everyone to like, share, and subscribe to the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel, where you can watch every Spurs post-game reaction show. Also, follow the Patel Pick and Roll Sports on Facebook, and follow me, Shivam Patel, on Facebook. And again, audience members out there, Spurs Nation, please put your chats and questions in the comment section below, and they will appear live in the show. I want to hear from you, Spurs Nation. What do you think about tonight's game? The Spurs really fought really hard, almost came up with the victory, but just fell a little bit short to the Brooklyn Nets. And of course, the Brooklyn Nets are one of the best teams in the NBA. They're probably at the top. They have three superstars: Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. Of course, Kevin Durant didn't play in tonight's game. He's been injured the last couple of games with a hamstring injury. And on the Spurs side, they were also shorthanded. Keldon Johnson, who was listed questionable by Pop, but decided to not to play him, for reconditioning purposes. We may or may not see him tomorrow. We're not sure. But at least Pop said that we'll see him before the other guys that are in protocol. Quindary Witherspoon, Derek White, are also, and Devin Vassell are in the COVID protocol right now. So they're probably not going to be available till after the All-Star break. So the Spurs are playing a little bit shorthanded. I'm playing with some guys in rotations that they're not used to playing. Keita Bates-Diop has been playing. Lucas Samanic even got some action. But, the Spurs fought really hard. Like I said, they were losing most of the game. They just didn't get the effort that they needed to be able to pull out this victory. DeMar DeRozan only had 22 points. Lonnie Walker had 19 points. He did make 5 threes, which was encouraging because he's been kind of in a funk lately. And I thought he was settling too much from 3 and looked a little bit uncomfortable. But it looked like he settled in, and his role is now defined. He knows the fine balance of when to attack the basket and when to shoot threes. So he made 5 threes. He was scorching hot. DeJounte Murray didn't have the usual DeJounte Murray game, despite having 19 points. He was able to get to his spots, make a couple of mid-range jumpers. But I thought he was a little bit too passive tonight. I would have loved to see him, attack the basket more, use that size, use that length, use that athleticism, and really get DeAndre Jordan and the other Nets players in foul trouble, because the Nets are a really weak defensive team. So DeJounte Murray could have really been able to take them off the dribble, as well as DeRozan. I would like to see those two guards more aggressive and set the tone for the team. And they didn't play at that level, like DeRozan, scored 30 points against the Pelicans. He had to have another night like that. DeJounte had to get close to 30 points, and Lonnie could have kept making threes. And, it takes that kind of effort against the Brooklyn Nets, because, they're not a great defensive team, but they'll just outscore you, and they really put a lot of pressure on their opponent to be able to keep up with them scoring wise. And the Spurs just couldn't do it. The defense was kind of lagging a little bit in the second half. They were, short on their rotations, allowed too many second chance opportunities, off a missed shot. And when you give this high potent Brooklyn Nets team multiple opportunities, it's going to be tough to win. Kyrie Irving had 27 points. Even though he wasn't as dominant as he usually is. James Harden, in the third and fourth quarter, really took the game over. He had 30 points, and when the Spurs were trying to trap him off the pick and roll, they had Bruce Brown, a guard for them, a 6'4" guard, play the point forward. So he would get the ball either at the free throw line or at the dunker spot near the lane, and he would just get easy buckets because the Spurs wouldn't want to leave their outside, shooters. And he was just feasting. James Harden would just dish it to him. He would just attack the basket. Or if the Spurs did collapse a couple of times, he would just find the open shooter. So Bruce Brown was critical for them, as well as Nicholas Claxton, two role players. Bruce Brown and Nicholas Claxton combined for 40 points. Bruce Brown had 23 points. Nicholas Claxton had 17, and that really made up the scoring for Kevin Durant. And when you have the Brooklyn Nets bench playing well, then they're going to be tough to beat. Even Shamet, made a couple of threes also, off the bench, and he was able to get, off the dribble. So it was tough, to guard this, because they're very multifaceted. They're very versatile. They can both shoot threes, take you off the dribble, go in the mid-range. They can get second chance opportunities. And the Spurs needed to pound the Nets on the boards, and they really didn't. LaMarcus Aldridge really struggled tonight, coming off the bench. He needed to have a dominant effort for the Spurs to be able to pull out the victory, but I think it was just a tough game for the Spurs overall. They didn't have their full players, but I love the way they fought. They competed, in the last, the last 2 minutes in the fourth quarter, they had a 10-0 run when the Brooklyn Nets were up by 8 points. They just fought back. They played really hard, gritty defense. Even the last possession when I thought Kyrie Irving was just going to get fouled, he missed a layup. The Spurs came down the other end. Murray looked like when he was driving, attacking the basket, he got bumped. He fell down. He picked up his shot and made a crazy mid-range shot to tie the game, and it was just insane. And I thought the Spurs were really going to feed off the energy of those young guys, because I love that the way that they battled through, they didn't give up. They continued to play with intensity and focus. But in the fourth quarter, I think you can just tell they got a little bit tired. Brooklyn Nets really amped up the defensive pressure on the Spurs, and then Brooklyn Nets just made shots. It's a make or miss league, and I think that's why the Spurs were, fell short. But it was an encouraging sign, because they don't have their entire team. They've not gotten a lot of practice time. These lineups have not played a lot together. I thought the Spurs, tonight jacked up too many threes. Brooklyn Nets had 56 points in the paint to only 42 for the Spurs. Spurs needed to pound the Brooklyn Nets in the paint. You have to punish them. They like to play a small lineup. DeAndre Jordan did not play very much tonight. So you really have to pound them on both the boards and in the paint and force them to play big. And they didn't. The Spurs were just, fell into the hands of the Brooklyn Nets by shooting too many threes, shooting too many contested threes, and too many turnovers. I know 9 doesn't sound a lot, but when you have such a great offense like the Brooklyn Nets, you cannot give them easy second chance and transition opportunities. And the Spurs allowed that. They were just very careless at times. It had nothing to do with the Brooklyn defense. The ball handling, I think they're just doing too much. A couple of times overpassing, and I think the Spurs fell into the turnover trap, and you cannot let that happen when you play against the Nets. But it's a good learning experience for the Spurs. They're going to get some good tape, get some good practice time, and hopefully be able to make the necessary adjustments, because there's only 2 games left before the All-Star break. Tomorrow night they're going to be back at the AT&T Center against the New York Knicks. So they're going to be playing the 2 New York teams. Then Thursday night they're going to be playing against the Oklahoma City Thunder before being off for the All-Star break, and before coming back to returning to the court March 10th or March 11th. So I think it's very important that the Spurs are be able to get these last 2 games, against the Knicks and the Oklahoma City Thunder, because the Knicks are a great team. That's not going to be a pushover matchup. I think the Knicks are playing really well right now. They're 4th in the East. So the Spurs are going to have to come focused and prepare, and hopefully they're going to have Keldon Johnson back. Remember, everybody, to like, share, and subscribe to the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel, where you can watch every single episode of the Spurs Reaction Show, and also follow the Patel Pick and Roll Sports channel or the page on Facebook, and follow the Shivam Patel page on Facebook, where you can get all the Spurs Reaction episodes. And please put your comments and questions in the chat section below. They will appear live on the show. So it looks like we do, have some comments from an audience member, and said the Spurs tried too hard, but not enough offense to keep up. I definitely agree. The Spurs, didn't have, they played hard, they played intense, but you have to have the offense if you want to beat the Nets. I thought the Spurs, even though they made 15 3-pointers, I thought they could have mixed attacking the basket and shooting the 3 a lot more. And I think they allowed too much of that. And also, an audience member also said, can't allow Harden and Kyrie to score and allow Brown and that player with the blonde hair to get all those points. Yeah, that player with the blonde hair, the audience member is talking about is Nicholas Claxton, which he's only like in the second year in the league. I believe that's what Bill Land said. And yeah, he was just very active. He got some good block shots, played some good defense. He allowed them to get a lot of lobs, easy putbacks. So I think you cannot allow that to happen. You have to force the others to beat you. And I thought the Spurs were going to play a little bit more zone. At the end of the first half. Pop for the last like 2 minutes threw in a 2-3 zone. It looked like it confused the Nets a little bit. So I thought Pop was going to go back to that, but he didn't. And also, it wasn't just a 2-3 zone. Spurs applied some full court pressure, which you don't see much of the NBA. You see that more in college, with West Virginia. But, they applied some full court pressure. They were trapping, on the sidelines. I love how active they were being. And the Nets really struggled, to do that. They weren't really trying to beat the press. So I thought I wanted to see a little bit more of that, combination of, full court press, 2-3 zone. But I liked in the second half that they were trapping the pick and rolls. They did a great job of trying to get the ball out of, James Harden's hand because he was the hot man on the floor. But I didn't like one time where, James Harden got trapped. He passed it to Bruce Brown at the free throw line. Bruce Brown tried to attack the basket. And then the Spurs actually collapsed on Bruce Brown when Jakob Poeltl, who's been a great shot blocker, his nickname is Blocka Poeltl, was right there. You left Kyrie Irving wide open in the corner for short corner three. You have to be sharp with your defensive rotations. You have to know the scouting report, knowing that, hey, I would rather Bruce Brown beat me than Kyrie Irving. So Spurs just need to get better at that, but I think that it just comes with experience, so I think they'll definitely be able to learn on that. And we got an audience comment. Dylan House is saying, how do you think the Spurs are handling with a lot of guys out with COVID? Yeah, great question, Dylan. The rotations have been a little bit funky. But I love the way, that DeMar DeRozan played against the Pelicans. He had that mindset that, okay, I'm going to put the team on my back and I'm going to will them to victory. He did a great job of knowing when to get his, and he also facilitated. He wasn't just ball hogging. I think this game, they were a little bit too passive when, you needed DeJounte Murray and DeMar DeRozan, your two best players right now, to attack the basket and be aggressive. And I think they weren't. But I think the Spurs are handling it well. It's a great opportunity, for some of the young guys. Kiera Bates-Diop had some nice defensive plays, had some nice drives to the basket, some nice rebounds. He even made a couple three-pointers. He's a versatile 6'8" wing player that has a really long wingspan. So maybe he can contribute, in stretches when they need some defensive players out there. And Luka Samanic even been playing, for the Spurs. He's been in the G League bubble with the Austin Spurs, but he got called up, because for the OKC game last week, they needed bodies. So they called up Trey Jones and Luka Samanic. And I like what Luka Samanic was doing. He got a couple wide open three-pointers. He was 1 of 2 from 3. One time he attacked the basket, which I didn't like because it was, it was congested. I thought he should pass it out, but he didn't do anything bad. He even played a couple nice, he even played some nice defense on some of the Brooklyn Nets attacking guards. So I think it's a great learning experience for these young guys and the guys that don't get a lot of minutes usually when the full rotation's there, because you never know in an NBA season, COVID, injuries, you have to be able to count on multiple guys to play. And I think it was great experience for that. So great question, Dylan. And we also have another audience member saying, also gave up too many offensive rebounds. Yep, exactly. Like I hit on, you play such great defense for 24 seconds, and it's just a backbreaker when you allow offensive rebounds. And that happened a couple of times late in the fourth quarter and even in overtime. You just cannot allow that to happen. You play such great defense, but a defensive possession is not over until you secure the rebound. And I think the Spurs could have done a better job with that. But also they could have done a better job of, in overtime, they let Kyrie Irving and James Harden be too free. Once they give up the ball, I want them in full deny mode. Try to prevent them from getting the ball again and force those other guys to beat you. Fine, if Bruce Brown, beats you to the basket, that's fine. You cannot allow Kyrie Irving and James Harden to beat you. You have to force the others to beat you. And I don't know if they would have, continued to play well, especially with the situation, with the game on hand, but, you have to try. And James Harden was just able to just get downhill too many times. Either, Jakob Poeltl converged on him. He just threw the lob. If he stood back, then, off the pick and roll, James Harden was able to get an easy floater or step back three. And I thought the Spurs pick and roll defense could have been better and the rotations could have been better. So before we sign off on this episode, so I'm just going to quickly talk about the next couple of games. Like I said earlier, they're going to play against the New York Knicks, who've been a surprise this season. So it's not going to be an easy pushover team. This doesn't look like the same New York Knicks team. Julius Randle made his first All-Star team. They have a lot of young guys around them. It's still a game I think the Spurs should win. I think, Keldon Johnson will come back tomorrow. I really hope so, because I think he'll be a great addition for them. But I think the Spurs need to come back, get some rest, be focused. make some more shots, and DeMar DeRozan needs to be aggressive. He needs to play the way that he did against the Pelicans in order for the Spurs to pull out the victory. Same as Oklahoma City. They owe Oklahoma City because they end up losing last week. Last Wednesday, of course, the Spurs was the first game back after all the COVID issues. So I think the Spurs need to come out, come focused, be ready to play. It starts on the defensive end these last couple of games. I want them to have a defensive mindset and set the tone on the defensive end of the floor, because I think their defense has been slacking a little bit. And I think if they do that, then their offense will come around. And these next two games are very important because you fought really hard for a really good seed. So, you're the 5th seed in the Western Conference, which nobody would have told you that the Spurs were going to be the 5th seed. So I think the Spurs need to win these last two games to preserve their seeding and get some confidence going into the All-Star break, to get some rest and be ready for the stretch run before the playoffs. And it looks like the Spurs are going to make the playoffs, but there's no guarantee. So I think every game is important, and every game the Spurs need to come out with the mindset to win the game. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to the Spurs post-game reaction episode. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Patel Pick and Roll Sports YouTube channel. Also on the Patel Pick and Roll Sports Facebook channel, be sure to follow that, and the Shivam Patel Facebook channel, where you can watch every single episode of the Spurs reaction show either live or on demand on Facebook and YouTube. And again, the Spurs have 2 more games before the All-Star break, and then after the All-Star break, I'll be back for the March 14th game against the Philadelphia 76ers, which is going to be the start of a long road trip for the Spurs. So I'll be back on March 14th again, right after the game. So make sure mark your calendars, set your reminders, and you get your notifications of when I come on live. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time. Signing out.